think so. So thank you everyone for coming tonight for this climate talk series. I'm Thomas, and today I'll be presenting a company called Conyat Create. So we work in sustainability, and climate change is a very important topic for us, and it's going to be one of the priority for this year in 2019. So we try to bring awareness, and we'll be doing every month a presentation, not me, but other speakers on climate change, different areas. So we want to raise awareness. I'm very happy tonight to have Jenny Harlan, who started Bokashi in Myanmar. So she will explain to you all about the concept. It's super exciting, but I'm not going to explain too much about it. But yeah, so I'll start for climate change. Okay. So first of all, I want to go a bit back in history and ask a question to the audience. How many people in the room think that our planet is 1 million years old? If you can please raise your hand. 1 million. Okay, nobody. How many people think that our planet is 1 billion years old? Raise your hand. So maybe people are shy, I don't know. Maybe it's the wrong answer. So, okay. How many people think that our planet is about 5 billion years old? Raise your hand. Okay, so that's more. So it's 4.5 billion, 4.6. And our planet, a long time, did not have the same temperature. So, for example, 65 million years ago, when the asteroid hit our Earth, all the dinosaurs died because of the temperature. So the temperature was about 11 degrees higher than now. And if you look at carbon levels as well, in the past million years, this is the first time that we've reached 400 parts per million. So it's a real problem. You probably heard of, who knows in the audience, Carl Sagan? Yes, one person? So, yeah, more. So Carl Sagan is a biologist, and he invented a calendar. And so you take the 1st of January, 2019 being, the creation of our planet, and then you take the 31st of December being today. So, on this calendar, do you know when humans started to be on the planet, modern human? Can anybody guess? A month or a day or an hour? If you want to raise your hand. Yes, Nitika? 4 hours? 4 hours? Okay. Anybody else wants to guess? Yes?
10 or 20 seconds.
How much?
Yeah,
you're actually closer. So humans arrived on the 31st of December at 11 p.m. and 47 minutes. So we've been there only for 13 minutes, which is nothing. And if you look at the past 200 years, during the industrial period, we released so much carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas. So yeah, humans have had a massive impact on this planet. So I want to talk about climate change first, and most people, when they hear about climate change, they think about temperature, which is right. Temperature are increasing, but they can also decrease in certain areas. So, for example, last year in UK, in winter it was extremely cold, and people didn't really understand why. The reason is our North Pole is melting, and so the currents are completely disrupted in the Atlantic Ocean. Which is creating actually lower temperatures in certain areas of Europe. So climate change means both things. It means higher temperature, but also lower sometimes. Of course, most people know that the poles are melting, and glaciers, for the ones that are hikers here, if their kids like hiking, it may be a problem for them because the glaciers are melting completely. The currents are also disrupted, as I said. And then sea is rising. So if you look at the IPCC, their model, the scientists right now are saying that the sea will rise of about 1 meter by 2100, which is enormous considering the amount of people that are living on this meter. It's millions on this planet. But today what I want to talk about is agriculture. How is climate change affecting agriculture? Because this is basically the way we feed ourselves. And also how agriculture inversely is impacting climate change. So just some general information on agriculture. In Myanmar, it's 38% of the GDP, so it's critical for the country. And climate change has a massive impact on agriculture. 60 to 70% of the population, depending on the source, their primary income is agriculture. So you may have certain farmers in Shan states, they have a side job that they do, but their primary income is agriculture. And on average, they make 3,000 to 5,000 jats per day. So 3,000 is in winter and 5,000 is in summer. So I'll let you make the calculation, but per month it's nothing. And when they need to buy grains to plant, they sometimes need to go to the bank and ask for a loan. And this bank will give an 8% interest rate, which is massive. In developed countries, usually you can have a loan for 1 or 2%. And sometimes what they do is they take other loans to pay back this loan that are 4% per month. So if you add this up on 1 year, it's massive. And they make their money only when they harvest, which is twice a year. They need to be very good at planning. Most people here get paid every month. So they have a very precarious status. And if you put into the equation climate change, then it makes it even more complicated. So in Myanmar, the crop yields as well are one of the lowest in Asia. And that's due to several things. The first one is knowledge. So knowing how to, when to plant, when to harvest, knowing the quantity of fertilizers that should be used, the concentration is in phosphorus, which concentration of minerals do you need for your plant to grow in the best scenario. So the crop yields are very low. Myanmar also, does anybody know German Watch here? German Watch. Okay, so this organization, they rank worldwide the countries that are the most risky in terms of climate change. And guess where ranks Myanmar? Third. So last year they were second, and now they're third behind Puerto Rico, which is known to have massive cyclones problems, and Honduras. So Myanmar has a lot of droughts, has a lot of flooding, and has a lot of cyclones. So it's a strategic area, but the problem is it's very hard to change the behavior of the farmers, because as an NGO or company, if you want to change something, how do you go and change the behavior or how farmers work? Because you can't really send them an email and say, well, we're organizing a training in Yangon, we'll pay you for the transport and you'll get a hotel here. It doesn't work like that. You have to send people there, and they are spread across a big country in different states. And if you make the calculation again, 55 million people multiplied by 0.6, that's 30 million farmers in Myanmar. So it's very complicated to change. I put here a map of Myanmar, but sorry, it didn't come up very well, so it's really small. What is important to take out here is that rice is the thing that is the mostly grown in Myanmar, so it represents 50% of the surface of what is being cultivated. Sesame is also an important thing. Here you have the dry region, and here you have the tropical area where you have oil palm that is grown. You also have rubber. In the middle you have chilies, and rice is pretty much grown everywhere on the map. So Myanmar is pretty good at rice. So climate change impacts agriculture in three main areas. Floodings is the most important in Myanmar. Then you have droughts in the dry area, dry zone in the center of the country. And you have storm and cyclones that we'll talk about after. So in terms of flooding, what are the numbers? So the scientists, what they predict is that by 2020, so in a couple of years, to 2050, there will be 10% more rain than there used to be. But the problem is this rain is not scattered along the year evenly. It arrives during the monsoon. So this means that there will be more flooding, but during the dry season, there will be no water. But there's going to be more and more rain in Myanmar. In 2015, the FAO, they made a study, and they said that 527,000 hectares of crop are affected. So this surface is about 10 times the size of Yangon. So every year, this is affected by flooding. And then in terms of fishing and shrimp, this is a very important sector in Myanmar, and 30,000 hectares were affected, and equipment destroyed, nets, boats. So flooding is a real issue. And what happens for flooding? So what I did is I took a plant and I interviewed her. So here is Marta. You can say hello to Marta. And basically I asked her, well, what happens when there's flooding? And she was quite straightforward with me. She was basically saying, well, if there's too much moisture around me, then there will be more fungi and insects growing and microbes. Also, when there's a flooding, when the water is running, you have all those rocks that come with it and earth. And so this is damaging Marta on the way, damaging the leaves. Photosynthesis also is inhibited, because if you have a paddy of rice that is completely submerged with water, the sun can't really reach the leaves properly. So plants are supposed to generate more oxygen than carbon dioxide, but with flooding it inhibits this process. And yeah, the roots also get exposed to the air, because when there's a lot of water running, you can see in certain areas, you can see the roots coming out, because it takes off the nice bit of earth on the top, on the surface. And what about droughts? So temperature has already increased of 0.5 to 0.7 degrees. So that's a fact. The temperature already increased. Now the question is, how much will it increase in the next decades? And what the scientists are saying is that by 2020, it will increase by 1.4 to 1.7 degrees. So there are different scientific models. This is called MAGIC, the one I picked, but there are other ones. It's quite scary to see that it will increase that much in just the next years. So I wanted to talk about Teen Yu, which is right here. So she basically has two kids. One is 11 and one is 3. And she is the only breadwinner in the family because her husband is working in construction, but there's no work. And she works in a dry zone in Myanmar. And every day she has to walk about 5 kilometers to get water in the pond. And she said 30 years ago, well, her ancestors, they didn't need to walk that much. There were ponds everywhere. They never needed to buy water. And so to give you an idea of how much money she makes, she has to take 3 kilograms of peanuts. And then with this, she makes 400 jat, and she will buy some rice for her family. And so what she said is that most ponds around, there's no more water, because people took everything. So she usually uses this water for washing, for cooking, but it's over now. So in the dry zones, we can see that livelihoods are really impacted. And in terms of drought, so after the interview, Marta died, so I had to pick another guinea pig for the drought. And so I picked Robert right there. And I asked him, so how does it work when there's drought? How do you deal with it? And he was like, well, the first thing is I can't grow my leaves properly. So you probably saw this, if you don't water your plants correctly, the plant is just gonna stabilize and try to survive. So it's not gonna grow. So the stem is not growing, the roots are not growing, and the leaves are not growing either. The problem also is when you have a lot of sun that is coming on the leaf, it's actually damaging the top of the leaf. So it's the same, the process of photosynthesis is inhibited. And the plant can't do its job, living properly, and the chemical reactions within the plant are halved. Okay, now storms, I think everybody knows about Nargis. I'm just going to give a couple of numbers. So Nargis happened in Myanmar, unfortunately, in 2008. 140,000 people died because of this cyclone. So usually cyclones happen in the ocean, but they don't make landfall. The problem is when they do. And we notice that with climate change, storms and cyclones usually make landfall more and more. And so this is, in terms of damage, this is the 6th biggest cyclones ever since humans have recorded cyclones. And for Myanmar, it's the biggest natural disaster ever since the country was there. In terms of damage, the government has estimated $10 billion. I don't know if this number is really right, because it seems like very round, but that's what they said. And then 65% of the paddies and crops were affected. It's very hard for farmers to, predict this kind of thing. Now they can receive a message on their phone that the weather is going to change, but eventually if a cyclone arrives on their crop, they can't do much. They can maybe protect their equipment, but the plants will die. Now I want to talk about the effect of agriculture on climate change, because agriculture has also a responsibility. If we want to live for the next hundreds of years, we need to know how to feed ourselves and stay sustainable. And one of the big problems with agriculture is deforestation. Myanmar has an incredible forest. Unfortunately, with the since the 1990 to 2010, so in 20 years, the forest has lost 20% of it. Every year, right now, the size of Brunei is lost, despite all the work that is being done by the UN. There's a big project at the moment that is financed by the UN, which is called REDD+. But despite this, there's illegal logging, and also agriculture is just taking so much space. So every year, 2% of the country's forest is lost. And if you look at Myanmar on the south part, you heard of mangroves. So mangroves, they act as a natural barrier. When you have a cyclone coming in, it can protect somehow the land behind. Because otherwise, without this mangrove forest, you just have the salty water that comes into the rice paddies, and those plants, they don't like salt, so they just die. And now farmers in south of Myanmar are learning that actually, mangroves, there's an ecosystem here. It's an ecosystem service, and it represents a lot of money, and we should protect it. So there's efforts being done in this area. Another problem is biomass burning. So farmers, there's a quick way if you want to have more space for agriculture, is you just burn it. And it's quite effective, it's quite quick. And you can see it if you do hiking in Shan State or other states, areas that are completely burnt. And it's not good for the soil either, because it's destroying all the microorganisms. The minerals, the minerals are still there, and they will always be alive, because minerals are not alive, but all the microorganisms die. So agriculture is taking space on forest, and also farmers have a tendency, and I completely understand them, because it has to be economically viable. So when you when you cultivate rice and you harvest it, you will still have a little bit of straw, about 20 to 30 centimeters left after. And so this could be used for livestock, but it's quite complicated. Either you need like a very expensive machine to cut the straw like very close from the earth, but that's difficult to do. Or you can take it manually out, but that's not something they do either because it takes too much time. So they just burn. And in India, there are some states already where they just not allow this kind of thing because in terms of health, it's a major problem. I don't know if you heard, but air pollution now is the single biggest threat to humans. Millions of people die every year because of air pollution. And this is happening in part because of the burning that is happening. And the gases that I put here are quite bad for humans. So you have carbon monoxide, you have nitrous oxides, sulfur oxides, methane. Methane is, by the way, 20 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And then, of course, carbon dioxide goes in the air. The last topic I want to talk about is livestock. Knowing that when you eat meat, you are having a bigger carbon footprint, I think is important. In terms of calorie generation, it is not viable, especially for beef, to continue, as the Americans are doing, eating hundreds of grams per day. It's just not possible because it demands so much resources and land and water to have those big cows. It's so much easier to just eat the plant itself. So for example, you take soy worldwide, 70% of it is not eaten by humans. It's eaten by animals. So we give all the space to animals. And so let's take 100 grams of beef, okay? How many kilograms of carbon dioxide are generated by 100 grams? So 105 grams of carbon dioxide. Now you take tofu. 100 grams of tofu, how much kilograms of carbon dioxide? 3.5. So that's 30 times less if you eat tofu. So, the cows are also a problem because they keep burping and farting. And I mean, this is a real thing. If you meet a cow, just let her know, like, we live in a civilized country now, it's over. There's so much methane that is generated by cows. It's enormous. Methane represents 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. So, yeah, I'm just ending on this note, and if you have any more questions, please do.